Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Summer Gathercole. I serve as Senior Advisor for the Behavioral Health Task Force. We are delighted to have all of you joining us today to participate in this public testimony session. I think, as most of you know, there are a group of organizations that came together to help get this public testimony scheduled, and that includes JFK Partners, the Alliance, the ARC, Colorado Developmental Disabilities Council, and Disability Law Colorado. We're really grateful for their support and the outreach that they have done to ensure that we're able to solicit feedback on the current behavioral health system and recommendations for what the Behavioral Health Task Force should consider going forward. I am excited and delighted to be able to introduce to you our Lieutenant Governor Primavera, who is hosting today's public testimony session, and very grateful that she is spending the time to be with us today. So Lieutenant Governor, I will hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Summer. Can you all hear me?
We can hear you. You sound great.
Great. Okay. So welcome. As she indicated, I'm Lieutenant Governor for the state of Colorado. And I don't know if we're joined today by the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Human Services, Michelle Barnes, or not. Has Michelle been able to join us today?
She is not able to join us.
Okay, yeah, Michelle had a death in the family, so I send my condolences to her. So I'm honored to host this opportunity, and we are joined by other task force and subcommittee members who are also listening and participating virtually. When Governor Polis announced the launch of the task force in the spring of 2019, he made it clear that everything is on the table. The system we have today works for some Coloradoans, which we're thankful for, but doesn't work for all Coloradoans. So we really have a genuine opportunity to make a significant systematic change and systemic change with our behavioral health system. And it's really rare that the stars align where you have leadership at all levels asking for and wanting significant change like this. So this is an opportunity to make a complete overhaul, if that is what we determine is necessary. We're not putting a Band-Aid on behavioral health to make things a little better. We can help put a system in place that works for everyone. We can be bold and creative, and we have to be bold and creative. The status quo just is not acceptable. Well, as we all know, COVID-19 has changed all of our lives, and we know that the need for behavioral health services is only going to increase in the coming months. Our administration remains committed to ensuring that Coloradoans get the help that they need. So as we explore options and opportunities, we must hear from people who have firsthand experience in trying to access and use our current behavioral health system. We want to learn what is working well as what could or should be done better and differently. So as a reminder, this session is being recorded and might be used to highlight the work of the task force. So we're grateful for all of you and your willingness to be part of this. Sharing your story and experiences can be difficult and yet so important. So we can't do this without hearing your input, so thank you. So Summer, do I hand it back to you to do the order of testimony participants?
Yes, thank you. I will definitely be helping to moderate today. And again, thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for taking the time to be with us today. And as you shared, there are a lot of powerful stories and experiences that we need to hear within the Behavioral Health Task Force to understand how we can improve things overall for all Coloradans.
Great.
Of course. Couple of just housekeeping rules before we jump into the listening session today. Everyone has been put on mute, and we do ask that you keep yourself on mute unless you are providing the public testimony that will help us to eliminate background noise. As the Lieutenant Governor said, we are recording this session. We did send out media releases yesterday to ensure that you're comfortable with being recorded. I will probably ask you again as we're introducing you to make sure that you're okay with that. And if you do not want to be recorded, that is absolutely okay. It's not a problem at all. The last thing that I would just share is that we have about 5 minutes each for public testimony. I have a timer ready on my phone that will go off in about 5 minutes. That's kind of your warning to wrap things up if you can. So with that, we're going to go ahead, jump in and get started. Our first participant today is Brian Talent. Brian, if you want to unmute yourself.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Brian.
Hi. I'm not sure why, but I'm on also Google Meet, which was I'm supposed to join through Google Meet, or is that not supposed to happen? The invite was sent to me, or I just ignore it.
You don't have to worry about Google Meet. You are in the right place.
Excellent, wonderful. Thanks for allowing me to address the task force. My name is Brian Talent. I'm a program director of the Intercept program at the Aurora Mental Health Center, which is an outpatient and day treatment program for youth who have developmental disabilities as well as mental health issues. And I've been program director there for over 23 years. And I wanted to talk with the task force today about just a pervasive problem that's been an issue not only in the state of Colorado, but across the country, but is still, even though we have had several dual diagnosis task force and addressed this issue for many, many times over the years, is still happening. And that is the issue of what's called diagnostic overshadowing. I serve on the board of the directors for the National Association for Dually Diagnosed, and I also sit on the expert panel, IDD panel for the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. And I want to point out that in the state of Colorado, or the Aurora Mental Health Center is 23 years later is still the only community mental health center in the state who has specific programs for adults and children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Even though for many, many years we've been aware of what we refer to as the dual diagnosis problem, there still hasn't been any progress made in terms of other community mental health centers developing specialized programs or having specially trained clinicians to work exclusively with this population. And I want to point out that for many, many years, people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities are what I have is not a clinical expertise. It's a cultural competency. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities are a disempowered minority within our community. And I want to point out that it's the only disempowered minority in our community whose minority status is defined by a medical diagnosis. And because their minority status is defined by a medical diagnosis, our healthcare system can legally discriminate based on disability because all of the mental health symptomology is over attributed to the person's disability, and therefore it's misdiagnosed as a non-covered diagnosis for behavioral health care. This has been happening for years and years and years. There's not anything indicative to a developmental disability that causes people to exhibit symptoms of depression, of anxiety, of schizophrenia, of bipolar disorder, of trauma. And we've got to stop doing the diagnostic overshadowing that affects this population on multiple levels. Diagnostic overshadowing starts with parents and teachers and educators and caregivers who just say, well, that's just the way that Johnny is. That's his disability. When in fact, Johnny is exhibiting symptoms of depression, anxiety, and the effects of trauma. We know what the rates of abuse and neglect and trauma are for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and it's astronomical. And people who are experiencing trauma have a covered diagnosis and need to be served in our behavioral health system. And we've got to get to the place where I believe that it needs to be mandated into the Medicaid contracts. Even though we've gone to the raise, they're still doing the same thing the behavioral health organizations did before them, which is the diagnostic overshadowing and attributing mental health symptomology to a person's disability, and then just throwing up their arms and saying, well, there's not enough providers and we don't know how to do this. That's not the case. What Aurora Mental Health Center did 25 years ago is not, it's not magic. What we did is we said, we're going to designate a specific clinician or a set of clinicians to specialize in this population so that they have a cultural competency as well as a clinical expertise to do proper assessments. Don't do the diagnostic overshadowing thing. Don't make the denials based on non-covered diagnosis, and let's get early intervention and accurate outpatient treatment to people, especially when they're children. We can prevent so much pain and suffering And we can save millions of state dollars if we do across the state of Colorado what we've done in Aurora, which is to intervene early and effectively with this population in terms of mental health care. And I served on the task force for the regional center task force. If we want to limit and reduce the number of people going into the regional centers at that expense and that cost, the only way to do that ethically is by attrition, and we can do it. I've seen the effects of what the long-term support needs are for people who get mental health treatment when they're early, when they're young, especially in the form of trauma treatment. So thank you very much. I think I'm probably close to my time, but thank you for letting me address you, and hopefully we can address this issue of diagnostic overshadowing and start getting requirements for mental health professionals that are culturally competent and clinically experienced in working with this population.
Thank you so much, Brian. And certainly if there's recommendations or anything that came out of the task force that you referenced, that you participated in, that you want to share with us, please feel free to pass it along. We don't want to recreate the wheel if we know that there's recommendations that we can already pull from. Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next person to testify is Julie Cook. Julie, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. And Julie, are you comfortable being recorded?
Yes, I am.
Great. Thank you. You can go ahead and get started.
Okay. I want to thank the members of the Behavioral Task Force for the opportunity to share our story with you today. Lieutenant Governor Primavera, as a mother of a 21-year-old daughter with severe autism, I am deeply grateful for the leadership you have shown in expanding services for those with autism in Colorado. In my capacity as a mother and a co-founder of a nonprofit autism treatment center, I testified before the Colorado legislature for the insurance bill you sponsored to mandate coverage for applied behavior analysis, ABA treatment. I also appreciate your involvement in the passage of the 2015 Mental Health Parity Law, which further expanded services for people with autism. I was encouraged to see that both Dr. Robinson and Dr. Oliver would be hosting this meeting due to their collective expertise in behavioral health specific to autism spectrum disorder. Because of your demonstrated record of commitment to helping Coloradans access meaningful health care, especially those with autism, I wanted to bring your attention to a pressing issue regarding services for adults with autism. As you know, ABA therapy is currently funded through the age of 21 as a medically necessary benefit through the Medicaid state plan under the early and periodic screening, diagnostic, and treatment benefit. However, after age 21, ABA is considered purely a non-medical HCBS waiver service subject to an annual cap that effectively eliminates ABA as an ongoing treatment option. Since our daughter was first diagnosed with severe autism by Sally Rogers at JFK over 18 years ago, ABA has effectively ameliorated the effects of her behaviors caused by autism and has allowed her to develop and maintain critical self-help skills. She has severe self-injurious and aggressive behaviors which have resulted in injuries to herself and others. ABA therapy has helped to reduce these behaviors, and without continuation of this therapy at the same level, her behaviors would escalate and she would experience significant regression of the skills she has acquired. Well, last July, our daughter turned 21 and lost all Medicaid state plan funding for ABA therapy overnight. Due to the cap on ABA funding through her SLS waiver, her services were effectively reduced by 90%. We requested the same level of benefits from our primary health insurance provider, and they denied 100% of the requested services. Luckily, my husband owns his own business, and we were able to change insurance providers at significant additional expense. However, this benefit will end when she turns 26 or sooner if the Affordable Care Act is repealed, or if the insurance company changes its position on this medically necessary coverage. The limited cap on services imposed at age 21 applies to everyone despite demonstrated medical need. Our daughter also has cerebral palsy and walks with a severe internal rotation of her right hip, knee, and foot, for which she wears braces and receives weekly physical therapy. I remember Dr. Rogers telling us that her CP would be far less debilitating than her autism. This has definitely proven to be true. And yet the irony is that when she turned 21, she continued to receive the same level of physical therapy and orthopedic care to treat her CP, but effectively lost all access to Medicaid-covered behavioral health care that has proved so critical to treating her autism. There is simply no rationale as to why ABA is considered medically necessary until the age of 21, and thereafter, regardless of individual need, is considered a non-medical waiver service akin to respite or homemaker care. Thanks to the 2015 Mental Health Parity Law, ABA has been determined to be medically necessary with no age or dollar caps under state private insurance, but this coverage only extends to age 26 and is not consistently applied across insurance carriers. ABA is also considered an essential health benefit under the Affordable Care Act and has also been extended to TRICARE beneficiaries with no age or dollar caps. New Mexico recently passed a law lifting all age and dollar caps for both Medicaid and private insurance coverage of ABA. Aside from ABA, I can think of no other medically necessary state plan services that are either eliminated or drastically reduced upon a Medicaid recipient turning 21. I think the task force will agree that Colorado could not eliminate diabetic or epileptic care upon a recipient turning 21 if such care was medically necessary. Yet that is exactly what is done with respect to ABA, the one therapy that has and continues to make the most impact in our daughter's life. The current policy of discontinuing services after age 21 for all Medicaid recipients disproportionately and wrongfully discriminates against adults with autism. Unfortunately, our story is not unique, with the autism rate now at a staggering 1 in 54 children. Many Colorado families are facing or will face the same problem when their child reaches the age of 21. ABA has provided a lifeline for our family and many other Colorado families dealing with autism. The need for ABA often extends into adulthood, and without adequate funding for behavioral health, adults will be left without access to an appropriate ABA-based program. It is my sincere hope that you will find a way to make this medically necessary service available beyond the age of 21. Thanks again for this opportunity to shed light on this issue, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And just thank you for all that background. Your daughter's certainly very lucky to have you. And clearly the task force has a lot of work to do. We appreciate you sharing your story. Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, we're gonna, before we move on to the next person, I just want to remind everybody that it was in the chat box, but closed captioning is available for those who are interested. There's just a closed captioning button on the bottom of your computer screen that you can click. On Zoom, it does have about a 4-second delay, so we did put the live stream in the chat box as well if you'd like to be able to read along in real time. So the next person that we have is Maureen Welch. Maureen, are you with us today? Maureen, if you're there, don't forget to hit *6 to unmute yourself by phone or unmute yourself on the computer audio.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. My name is Maureen Welch.
Maureen, maybe?
Hello?
Wait, Maureen, are you still there?
I am, yes.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened, but go ahead and start again.
Okay. My name is Maureen Welch. I live in Arapahoe County. I have a teenage son with an intellectual disability, which is Down syndrome, and he also has autism. He's non-speaking and has behavioral support needs. I happen to be a recovering teacher myself, endorsed in both general education, and special education. Today, I want to comment on how behavioral health system in Colorado struggles to serve people like my son who have an intellectual disability, also known as IDD. I prefer to look at my son's challenges as more social than medical. He experiences the world very differently than a neurotypical person because of how he is wired, sort of like the difference between a personal computer, PC Windows-based, versus a Mac iOS-based. I do not see him as mentally ill. Neurodiversity is an approach to learning and disability that argues diverse neurological conditions are a result of the normal variation in the human genome. Neurodiversity is recognized and respected as a social category on par with gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or disability status. I did find one recent addition to Colorado's behavioral health landscape very positive and helpful, and I wanted to share it with you today. It's called High Fidelity Wraparound. A version of this intervention is offered on the CHIRP waiver since 2019, July. The CHIRP waiver is the Children's Habilitation Residential Program waiver, which is a home and community-based services waiver. I know a 19-year-old youth who is accessing residential services through the CHIRP waiver. He lives out of his home in a foster care home. The wraparound that he gets in the waiver, which is called something else on the waiver because we want to confuse people more, it's called the Home Intensive Support Services, is way more helpful for his mental health than the 45-minute-a-week talk therapy session that he receives. The facilitator in High Fidelity Wraparound holds a monthly meeting of both paid and unpaid support people in the youth's life. This particular young man, I'm on his team. We celebrate with him. We commiserate with him about having to stay home during the pandemic. And we also work together on his goals to move him forward into employment, stable mental health, and independent living. Having one head coach coordinator of services and providers around shared goals that the youth determines is something that I've always felt is lacking in all the home and community service-based support waivers. I just want to say that the High Fidelity Wraparound model is a great investment, and it's also very respectful of neurodiverse people like this youth and my son. I hope that this benefit can be expanded under Senate Bill 19-195. It's a much needed coordination of people and providers in a youth's life that results in increased self-esteem, reached life goals, and better mental health. It's my dream that this service is available to people on all forms of Medicaid, not just one particular small waiver. Thank you very much, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Great, thank you so much, Maureen. And I know that there are a number of people from our children's subcommittee, in particular, at least one of our co-chairs who is listening in today. So I'm sure he's taking notes to take back to the subcommittee. So we appreciate the recommendation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you.
Okay, next we are going to go to Lauren Weinstock.
Hi, I'm here.
Great. Hi, Lauren. Are you comfortable being recorded?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Great.
Okay, I'll try to be as quick as I can. My name is Lauren. I'm a mother of 5, and today I'm here as Nathan's mom and his advocate. A little Star Trek reference, I call him 3 of 5. He is the 3rd child. For 2.5 years, we've been Colorado residents. Very early on, I asked for help. Let me say that this was not the first time in his life that I've asked for help. And I am now 68. So 2.5 years ago, I was 65 and a half. And at this moment in time and space, I have been a single parent for 25 years. So I asked for help, and I was given a behavior service agency to work with my son. I would just characterize their overall functioning as sloppy, and we'll leave it at that. A behavior worker came to the house for exactly 1 hour a week. There was no behavior plan for 2.5 months. There was no supervision. There was no accountability. No records of their work were provided to Nathan's case management agency. When I asked about that, I was told that the case management had to specifically ask for records, and they didn't do that on a regular basis. I made many comments of concern to case management, to supervisors. I was considered a difficult parent to work with. It went on for 11 months. And finally, at that point, I was told that if I didn't like the service with the behavior service agency, I should just tell them to stop providing care. That was the first time I was told that it was in my hands to do that. I want to switch to our current situation. 5 days into sheltering at home, I wrote to Denver Human Services and suggested ideas. And let me give you the reason about that. From the time I was 13 and volunteered with children with a variety of disabilities at an ARC program that was held in a one-room VFW post, to the current time, I have always been involved in the disability community. I have also been a teacher, whether it was art after school or religious classes, and one of the things that I'm good at and I love doing is writing curriculum. So a few days into sheltering, I realized that the level of stimulation that my son would normally receive 5 days a week, going to day programs, going on respite trips and respite activities, had just fallen off, as we all know. And it was not something that I couldn't provide a substitute, although I have spent quite a bit of money buying him things of interest to keep him going from day to day. I'm part of a parent support group on Facebook, and one parent said it very succinctly: staying home and regressing is not a life for her child, for her adult child. I should say that while I'm 68, my son is 38. People with Down syndrome are said to be about 15 to 20 years older than their age in terms of their body's functioning and aging. And I think it's crucial that my son be actively engaged. When I sent a list of ideas and suggestions that could be easily implemented, I got no response. I wrote a second time, and the third time I was angry and said there was no reason, with the budget that they have through mill levy funding, not to implement something. And I also talked about mental health. That piece never came about. The piece about the ideas for providing stimulation has become a grant through mill levy in Denver City and County at Denver Human Services and is active. And I'm proud of that. I'm not proud of the mental health piece being ignored. My son has a quick temper, and I often say that his response when he gets angry goes from 0 to 60 in about 1 second. He will burst into my space screaming at the top of his lungs. I have no idea why. I have no idea what set him off. And I just have to cope with attempting to redirect him, which often works and often doesn't work.
Lauren, you have about 1 minute left.
Okay. What I'm told is many people with Down syndrome have obsessive compulsive symptoms, and I see that in my son. So what that looks like is many times throughout the day, he'll tell me it's over, meaning this life under COVID at home is over. Or he'll tell me 5 to 7 times a day, look, and he pulls up the library website and he says, it's open. I can't express to you how frustrating it is that to always trying to come up with solutions to provide some help. I have taken him to a child psychologist. He creates art. I buy all kinds of supplies. And I wonder, with the connections that he has through having service at Rocky Mountain Human Services, through Denver Human Services, through HICPUF, through all of these agencies, and why there is not a sense of immediacy to helping people like my son, particularly right now, but any day of any year. Because if I have a headache, I do something about it. He has a lifetime of stress and distress. And why aren't we helping him? And that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you so much. And thank you for being a parent advocate, and thank you for being a strong woman. Your son is really, really lucky to have you.
I need to say one other thing. I am a member of the advisory council, the Mill Levy Advisory Council, Denver Human Services. We found a program called the Center for Start Services. Online, it's centerforstartservices.org. And I believe you'll be seeing something about this soon. DHS will be putting out a request for funding for grant. We hope to have a START program begin in Denver in the next few years, which will address some of the issues that we're talking about today.
That is exciting. Thank you for your service, and thank you for sharing that. And we'll keep an eye out for it so we can share that with others as well. Thank you again.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Sure. Okay, the next person we have scheduled to testify is Lloyd Lewis. Lloyd, if you're with us, don't forget to unmute yourself.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to provide testimony today and comment. My comments are going to be brief.
Lloyd, are you comfortable being recorded?
I'm sorry?
Are you comfortable being recorded?
Sure.
Okay.
Just not my
Thank
face.
you.
No, I'm kidding. I believe that there is a lack of clarity on how to access mental health supports for individuals with intellectual disabilities. I should say that I'm the parent of a wonderful young son who's 16 with Down syndrome, who's in high school. And I'm also with the CEO of the ARC Thrift Stores. We're one of the largest employers of people with intellectual disabilities in the state. We have over 350 wonderful employees with intellectual disabilities. But this lack of clarity can be really hard for my employees and for me as a parent. I'm concerned for all of my employees, and I'm concerned for my son as a parent for his future and his access to needed supports. In high school, his behaviors become a little bit more challenged. He has difficulty sometimes interacting with teachers and with people in authority. He's what's known as a runner, and trying to assess whether these are behavioral issues or mental health issues is difficult for me and my wife, and difficult for some of the people he's involved with at his school. And I'd have to say I'm not happy with the lack of communication between behavioral analysis and behavioral mental health supports. They seem to be two systems that don't really talk to one another. And it's really hard for people like me and others to understand how our family members of our loved ones with intellectual disabilities expected to navigate this system. It's very confusing. Where do we go? How is it funded? And the same thing applies to my employees who, particularly in this period of stress and confusion and trying to understand the pandemic and why their typical daily activities are being constricted and changed. It's very confusing, and I think there's an enhanced need both for mental health supports and behavioral supports. Those are my comments.
Thank you so much, Lloyd, for taking the time to be with us today. And we've certainly heard quite a bit about how convoluted and confusing our system is. So we're working hard to try to address that.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, the next person that we have scheduled to testify is Christy Blakely.
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, I can be recorded.
Great, thank you,
Answer
Christy.
all the questions. Thank you for allowing me the honor to testify. I also want to say I've never seen this many on a Zoom that are not multitasking. Everybody is focused and listening, and that's pretty impressive for a group. So I thank you for that. My name is Christy Blakely, and I'm currently on Medical Services Board. I'm also the Executive Director of Family Voices Colorado. I am the parent of a daughter, adult daughter with significant healthcare needs. However, behavioral needs are not something that we, I'm getting a phone call and I can't do both. Sorry, I apologize. It's ringing in my ears, in my hearing aids. So anyway, I had the opportunity to work under a contract with Healthcare Policy and Financing, coordinating a program called Creative Solutions. Creative Solutions is a program utilized by Healthcare Policy and Financing to coordinate the service providers and families for children with co-occurring or comorbid mental health diagnosis and developmental delays or disabilities. Creative Solutions is often the first time a family has the ability to have all the providers involved in a child's care on a single call in a coordinated fashion. And at the time, while I did that contract, I was just so touched by how many families were just didn't even have words because it was the first time they had everybody on a call, and they could coordinate and not have to be the middleman. I watched folks do this all these years, and I just have to say it's pretty amazing when you do see something that is working. So we, Creative Solutions facilitated the calls, and they worked to find the solutions for the child, whether that was a placement or a service or, you know, figuring out the challenges that were being addressed at the time. Typically, they were referred to Creative Solutions after about 2 to 3 emergency room visits due to behavioral crisis. So then we would get involved. And one of the things that we did was took a 360 kind of comprehensive approach, identifying the providers who might have been overlooked in the child's services. In other words, it wasn't unusual to find a kiddo with developmental delays and mental health who'd been in and out of the hospital, but the community center board had never been engaged. Or we were having the calls and the school was never involved, and we would have to work to get those folks on the call and involved. Many times these calls were 15 to 20 to 30 calls over an amount of months, once a week or twice a week, depending on where we were and what was going on. During my work, I better understood the need for better coordination for these individuals. We were able to negotiate step down to home. I'll explain that by saying if a kiddo was in placement, rather than the family getting a call at Friday at 5 o'clock who said, come pick up your kid, we're discharging. We would negotiate a step down where the kid would, for a number of weekends, go an increased amount of time home with supports so that there was a successful step down into the home rather than just a drop and run kind of a, I'm not trying to offend anybody. It's just a matter of that's kind of how it felt when families were getting calls at, Friday at 5 to come pick the kid up. And it was typically before a holiday weekend or something where they were getting no supports. And then the kid was back in the ER on Sunday night and everybody wondered why. So we were able to negotiate those step downs. Rather than the discharge previously with no supports in place, we were able to get those supports in place. And we were able to understand in the work that we did with Creative Solutions, understand the resources that were available, which was really key to the placement, as well as reducing the amount of time the kid waited someplace while we were trying to figure that out. So knowing what beds were open, where they were open, knowing when necessary out-of-state placements and who took which kids was really pretty critical to not having to call around constantly, but having that information. I always joked about, we know what the ski conditions are on any run at Keystone, but we can't seem to figure out what placement has a bed that's available for a female that has certain specified needs at any time. So it kind of almost requires a database that really is robust. Understanding those resources was really key, as well as other resources that could be utilized. Here's what I'm laying out. Colorado needs a plan which includes the following. 1, provides crisis support and the ability to stabilize the child. 2, has a comprehensive wraparound planning. I think Maureen Welch said high fidelity. I like that term, but I don't know that it says more than just comprehensive wraparound planning for the child and the family. 3, includes both physical, dental, and mental health evaluations, as mental health sometimes drive the behavior, such as a bad tooth, etc. Pre-planning. 4, pre-planning discharges to a home with supports in place and a step down when necessary. 5, works with the family. And when I say that on number 4, I also mean 24/7, 7 days a week. Not, Monday through Friday, because these families have crisis on Sunday afternoon or on Saturday evening and they can't get anybody. I had one mom say, you have 3 people to take him down and I'm not allowed to call the police. And it's just me. So I heard those things when I was working with Creative Solutions. 5, working with the family as well as the child as part of the team. 6, has a care coordination process which understands the complex needs of the individual and the family and has knowledge of resources such as facilities, beds, out-of-state placements, insurance carriers, because you could wait a week to get a call back from somebody and then find out they don't even carry the same insurance, and the primary insurance always trumps the comes first before the secondary or the Medicaid. 7, has flexible funding. This is really critical, which can assist payment of things such as recreation fee, center fees, equipment, school services, travel, and other things like that. We would be on calls and these families would be driving to Nebraska to take a kid to a placement, and nobody could pay the family for the gas or the food or the lodging that it took to get the kid there. But we would expend a lot of money to send just the child with a secure person on a plane securely. It never made sense to me.
Christy, you have 20 seconds left. I just want to give you the warning.
I can do it. Name that tune. These children are complex as well as costly. I'm encouraging this committee to recommend a process which works for these families and children. There have been comprehensive reports and papers with recommendations for over more than 10 years. It's now time to act. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Christy. Thank you for giving those 7 specific recommendations. And I think many of us on the task force agree with you that we've been talking about this for way too long and it's time to take some action. So thank you. Okay, the next person to testify is Michelle Newman. Michelle, if you want to unmute yourself.
Okay.
And are you comfortable being recorded?
Yes, I get permission to record. Some of you may remember me, most of you don't know me. I'm currently a 65-year-old autistic savant. I was not professionally diagnosed until age 60 when I went into the DVR program. And I was with Mental Health Center of Denver from 2006 to 2010. When I was self-diagnosed, they refused to acknowledge that. And when they couldn't provide me any services or supports, I left them in 2010. I'd heard about Colorado Can Do then and got active for 5 years on Colorado Can Do as an adult on this self-advocate on the spectrum. And trying to do the 10-year strategic plan. Everything was great, but I kept finding that the focus always went back to children and young adults and transition. And that no matter how much I talked and wanted to express the challenges of older adults, especially women on the spectrum, it seemed like they were just polite and it went in one ear and out the other. And it has created such a discouraging life as I age. I finally realized I needed help because since 2005, I've not had any family support. I've been on my own, but I've lived independently my whole life. But as I get older, I'm finding out health concerns and issues that should have been addressed 30, 40 years ago, because everything was focused on my mental health and nobody knew I was on the spectrum. And so I've had numerous hospitalizations and crises. Since 2014, I've been living in Longmont in Boulder County. And so in 2016, I surrendered my retirement pension so I could get on Medicaid and get into services with Imagine CCB. Because the state had lifted the restriction on CCBs, couldn't restrict their clientele to IQ of 70 or less. When I was diagnosed, I was assessed with an IQ of 125. I know it's higher because I had a vitamin D deficiency at the time. So anyway, things get very discouraging. I still try to advocate, but more closer to home. I helped actually establish the steering committee for Longmont's SAM program, which is Supported Action Against Mental Health. But after an incident where EDGE, which was the Mental Health Partners program, brought in with the police to try to prevent, sending people to jail that have mental health issues, they came and made it worse. They did not communicate effectively. My coping mechanism at that time was I would drink when I couldn't get any help. And my physical issues were so intense. And so I got hauled out to Longmont United, intoxicated. They transferred me to Clearview Behavioral in Johnstown right after it opened into acute geriatric care. I was still intoxicated when they transferred me. It took 28 hours before a psychiatrist spoke with me. And then all he did was insult me and said my problems are because my father was an alcoholic. And the whole 10 days I was there, they denied that autism was a problem. One nurse that dispensed meds when I went there was having an anxiety attack attacked. She refused to give me my meds because she said, don't use your autism as an excuse. And as an adult, high-functioning person that seems highly competent, all 7 of my sensory systems are either insufficient or hyperactive. And I'm in a world and things are spiraling. My housing problem last year, I finally got into affordable housing, a senior community with Longmont Housing Authority. They hired a new executive manager, and it was like for a year, I'm just coming off of a year of serious trauma through psychological abuse and bullying. But because it's not a caregiver or a rehabilitation or nursing facility, it's not addressed. We need to start looking at the issues of your little kids. The little kids are going to grow up and become adults, those that are a little bit higher functioning and can live independently. We still, I mean, I'm so smart, but my executive function skill are squat. I can't understand why it's important to take care of myself. And my whole life, I lived to serve other people. My only purpose was to help other people. And I'm great. I'm a housekeeper, I'm a cook, but it's for other people. If I benefit, that's fine. But people do not want to understand the mentality and the inner workings of a person on the spectrum, especially an older person on the spectrum who has lived independently, but lacks so many social and functional skills. And I was served with a restraining order by a Boulder County judge last August based on 2 Facebook postings. And it was issued by Longmont Housing Authority Executive Director. And I couldn't talk to management, their staff, until I went to court for 10 days. I couldn't do my trash, check my mail, and I'm falling apart. And that traumatized me. And so, especially with aging adults on the spectrum or with any developmental disability, it doesn't matter what kind of bullying or abuse, where it comes from. It is very traumatic. Since the SAM program was initiated, Longmont has what they call a core team that works better public safety. It's the community outreach and resource something. And Easter weekend, things really blew out of proportion last year. And Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I had core representatives at my apartment for 4 evenings, for a couple of hours. And they respected me. And this core program is so much different than the EDGE program, because I have trust issues. I would not let them in the door. They were willing to go outside my apartment window. I live on the 1st floor, and respect my boundaries and speak to me through the window for 3 days. Finally, Sunday night, it was raining. My pastor was actually a volunteer chaplain on the team, and I had no clue. And I said, okay, you guys have proved yourself. I'll let you in. You can come in out of the rain. And so even though I was on the steering committee for the SAM project, I felt I wasn't heard as a consumer, especially one that has, dual diagnosis, mental health, plus, autism and numerous health issues. And if
Michelle, you have about 30 seconds left.
Okay, if you're unwilling to speak with the people who can communicate and live with this 24/7, programs are going to go nowhere. I'm discouraged, and I'm in a state that I don't know who I am or what I want to be, and I'm just living the hours and minutes of my life. That's harsh. I'm sorry, but I've been away.
Michelle, you've had to overcome a lot. You really have. You've persevered a lot. So I know that was challenging. So thank you for sharing that. And it sounds like the core program is a good, strong one, and that's really helpful for us to know. Thank you for being with us today. Okay, the next person we have to testify is Renee Wreath. Renee, don't forget to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Can you
you.
hear me?
Thank you. Are you comfortable being recorded?
Yes, I am. So here I want to begin with post-traumatic stress and spoon theory for caregivers over and above our own personal baggage and our own other mental health challenges in the day-to-day of life. I care for 2 young adult sons with intellectual disabilities. Both of them are now out of school. My oldest, 24 years old, has intractable frontal lobe and temporal lobe epilepsy, autism, clinical depression, and intermittent explosive disorder. Most people don't understand the epilepsy autism connection. Both of these are neurological conditions, and there are a high number of people on the spectrum who also have some form of epilepsy. This affects his mental health, his moods, his processing ability, and frequently his ability to merely speak, to spit out words, because the seizure activity that's in the frontal lobe makes it impossible for him to even answer a one-word question. It gives him problems with coping, and he has ongoing anger and aggression. The incessant seizure activity impacts every area of his life and even causes regression. He is on a long-term care Medicaid waiver, the DD waiver, and when he was younger, we did receive ABA services, but now at 24, of course, he's not eligible, and that is sad because we really benefited from ABA services. In addition, how epilepsy affects his memory. We've also had medicines that cause problems. Google Keppra Rage. If you've never heard of it, it's a thing. Keppra can make certain individuals absolutely lose any sense of self-control. And we've dealt with that for years. Ethosuximide, also given for epilepsy, causes severe mood instability, but he was given that medicine for years. Despite the fact that affective aggression in patients with temporal lobe epilepsy is also a thing. He was jailed in 2015 at 20 years old, even though he was cognitively and developmentally much younger. He spent 2 weeks in jail. The jail law enforcement, they took one of his epilepsy medicines away. So he had repeated seizures and head injuries while he was incarcerated for that 2 weeks. And he was suicidal, so he ended up spending a lot of time on watch when he never should have been jailed. I had to fight to get him a public defender, and I had to fight to get him onto a DD waiver and into a host home after severe injury due to being alone during severe seizure activity, and the fact that he has extremely vulnerable behaviors as a person on the spectrum. And the only resources available to this day, I moved him back home in January last year. The only resources available to us are the police when something happens. The caregivers in PASA, over the 3 years that he was in a host home, they never identified further needs. When I moved him back home last year in January 2019, we finally found an epileptologist in Denver. And so she has been an absolute godsend. Currently, there is no day programming available that I consider medically qualified to serve him capably, because he is high functioning in many ways. But with the seizure activity and now COVID-19, I'm having a really hard time allowing him to go back to day program, even if the doctor gives us a note stating he can go back. I've made suggestions over the years to the CCB and the PASAs, but there have been no consideration to my suggestions for him. I have another 20-year-old son with cognitive and developmental delays, but he is capable of many ADLs and other things, but he has to have the right supports. Aspen Point has been severely lacking. Their therapists say they don't know how to work with him, and they demonstrate that. And they also say that, well, if he doesn't have a mental health diagnosis, how do we serve him? What are you there for if you can't give him a mental health diagnosis? He struggles also. He got ABA services when he was younger. Those services were taken away because I guess only people on the autism spectrum deserve or benefit from ABA services, when that is not the case. They also, Aspen Point here in Colorado Springs also has a culinary program to help people who need help to gain that trade. They refuse to even consider him because of his cognitive ability. Aspen Point receives federal funding and is there to help people with disabilities and with mental health challenges. They refuse to even consider putting him into the culinary program with supports like ADA supports like he would have at school. He was in the culinary program at Fountain Fort Carson High School, and he was given appropriate supports during that time. Aspen Point refused to even consider it. They're a nonprofit and they receive federal funding. So that's an issue. We also need to...
Renee, you have about 30 seconds left.
Okay, thank you. We also have needed help with more intense rage and problems. We could not access that help through mental health or behavioral health channels. I had to literally kick him out of the house and be reported to DHS before we could access an organization called Maple Star, which sent a person to our home several days a week to help us. That was only accessible through DHS, not through regular behavioral health channels. And now, between these things, he's out of school. What do we do next? Having proper supports, he's scared to death of trying to be out in the community because the only proper supports we've had are in the school environment. Now that he's finished with his transition program, what do we do next? Thank you.
Thank you for Renee. And I'm sorry the system hasn't been working so well for you and your sons. We're committed to changing that, so thank you. Okay, the next person we have scheduled is Cathy Sykes. Cathy, don't forget to unmute yourself.
Okay. I am Cathy Sykes. I live in Durango.
Cathy, are you comfortable being recorded?
Yes, I am. Sorry. Yes, I am.
Thank you.
I live in Durango. I have mental issues and disabilities as well. I desired to help the Durango, healthy Durango, make it better. A few points I have here, additional training for the people that work with mental health people, like the people that have access to make them do a once a month training to handle mental health people at the access in Durango. We have a high turnover rate at access. There's lack of trust. We need people to work more than 6 months so get used to know who they are, the counselors are. We need additional mental health, maybe a mental health physician for our mental doctor in Durango to help her out with the mental issues. Also do Zoom calls to people when you're upset to talk to, video chat someone to talk to by Zoom or another way, be eye contacted. We need additional support groups that have smaller support group, mental health classes with drawing or pulling your feelings out more and painting. They can express what you're feeling in small groups of 5 or 7 people. We're lacking mental health here in Durango right now. Especially with COVID happening right now, it's just been really hard for me. I moved during COVID, different place. It's been struggled to a new area. That my kids all stopped helping me out because the pandemic happened. I am working, but my job is shut down right now. And I think that I'm a CCI board member as well in Durango. I just think that people need more mental health in Durango to get more functional better. A lot of things have been shut down right now because of the pandemic, but I think that we had Zoom for the mental health patients. You can get more support that way as well, not just by phone.
Great, thanks, Cathy. Thank you for sharing such specific recommendations. It's really, really helpful for us to hear. And you should know we just specifically set up a new committee to look at kind of the impacts of COVID and the pandemic, and also to explore how do we better support telehealth and telehealth going forward, so that we can make sure that folks have more connections through platforms like Zoom and so forth. So really appreciate your recommendations today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been really hard because for me with anxiety issues, it's been hard with the COVID right now too. It's been hard for me, anxiety, mental issues with COVID as well, with no support because they've been shut down because of COVID. So, but yeah, I think they need more support for the mental health people here in Durango. So.
That's great. It's good to know. Thanks for joining us from the southwest corner of the state.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, the next person we have scheduled is Kelly. Oh, I'm going to mess up this last name. Kelly Bianucci.
Great job. Yes. Hi. Thanks, Summer. And thank you, everyone, for allowing me to be a part of the testimony today. My name is Kelly Bianucci, and I'm the Executive Director of the Child and Family Therapy Center of Denver. And I'm calling in from Arvada, Colorado today. We provide mental health.
Comfortable being recorded?
Yes.
Okay, great. Go ahead. Thanks.
So we provide mental health, behavioral health, movement, and pediatric massage therapy services to over 700 children with special needs and developmental disabilities here in the greater Denver metro area. We are almost entirely funded by state funding sources, the children's waivers, the CLLI, Children with Life-Limiting Illnesses, Children's Extensive Support, Children's Habilitation Residential Program, and the Adult Supported Living Services waivers. We also serve general Medicaid and CHP+. I've been following the work of the Children's Services Committee of the Behavioral Health Task Force, and I understand one of its key areas of research and action is funding for behavioral health services. So as a result, I volunteer to provide testimony on this topic from the perspective of a large provider. First of all, I very much understand the budget challenges brought on by our current economic downturn. However, the reason why I am testifying about this today is to raise awareness that funding for mental and behavioral health services was a barrier even before 2020. It has gotten increasingly hard to sustainably operate our practice in light of this funding situation. Last year, Medicaid, through the Colorado Community Health Alliance, cut its mental health services rates by 20%. And this was put into effect at the beginning of this year, even before the whole COVID situation. So as a result, we've had to make difficult decisions, including winding down a much needed applied behavioral analysis practice, simply because we could not attract and maintain a workforce of clinicians at the state's reimbursement rates for their services. We've also had to diversify our own funding sources by joining the Anthem Blue Cross panel, and I fear that over time, if the funding situation does not improve, we, along with all providers, will be forced to pursue private pay just in order to stay alive. And the net effect of this is going to diminish the supply of clinicians available to serve children on state-funded programs. I share this so that the task force and those listening to this testimony are aware of the second order effects of these barriers to adequately funding clinicians who are providing these much needed behavioral health services. You know, we are dangerously close to the point of losing large parts of this workforce because the state is already cutting into very slim margins. You know, we can't keep cutting when all other costs are rising. It's just not sustainable. So I just share, as someone who does have to manage an organization, again, not just through the COVID situation, but even prior to that, it's not just cutting fat, we're cutting into the muscle and the hearts of our providers, and the mental and the behavioral health ecosystems can't survive without providers. And so I ask that The task force considers this, and also to encourage collaboration and getting creative with all of your stakeholders, including providers, to implement solutions. Additionally, as I am formerly from the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade, I think we can be convening more with both the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment and the OEDIT office, as this is not just a healthcare topic, but also one of workforce development, job creation, and business support as well. So that is my testimony. Thank you for your time today. And I have provided my contact information to the organizers of this event, and I'm happy to support the work of this task force going forward.
Great, thank you so much, Kelly. And I will share with you, we have had a couple of conversations with CDLE specific to addressing kind of the workforce shortage, but haven't really connected with OEDIT, so we'll make sure to add that to our list. And certainly, any providers that have suggestions or recommendations, please feel free to share them with us. We continue to be open to hearing them, so thank you. And thank you for the good work that you're doing. Okay, next we have Cristiano Sosa.
Hi, Summer. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, and everybody who is on this call. It's pretty substantial. Yes, you have my permission to record, Summer.
Thank you.
I think you've heard from the testimony. This is really a long-standing issue that lots of advocate groups and organizations have really been working piecemeal to fill the gaps over a couple of decades. Primarily at the ARC of Colorado, we've done that through rules, regs, and legislation or bills. Yet challenges remain. And I really see it in three sort of buckets. The first is diagnostic. While the RAIs have been a great addition to the behavioral health landscape, there's still challenges in terms of primary diagnosis, secondary diagnosis, or lack of diagnosis altogether. The fact is we have two systems. One is fee-for-service and one is capitated. We believe that billing guidance for both of these systems would really be most helpful. You know, and the reason for that is we want access to services based on needs rather than diagnosis. So it's a bit of a philosophical shift. The other sort of complicating factor is access to person-centered individual plans that are holistic and includes crisis stabilization in addition to having those supports in place prior to a crisis happening, which leads me to my second bucket. And it's about accessibility of the crisis services system to folks with IDD. Again, the crisis response bill, many of which, so that's HB 1368, many of which on the phone we're a part of, was a great step forward. And really spoke to the START model or the high fidelity sort of wraparound services.
Cristiano, we lost your audio.
Okay, I'm back.
Oh, there you go. You're back.
That there is a lack of hospitalization or alternative care for individuals experiencing crisis. We would love to see an expanded capacity there. And this might include scheduled respite. It might include therapeutic respite, medication management, and that we really look at that for both adults and for children, because we also have two separate systems for adults and children. And really the third recommendation or bucket, and you've heard it over and over in terms of testimony, is about workforce capacity. Really training on dual diagnosis and having that bench of people who are trained and available for dual diagnosis. Again, I'll point to the START model, which is well-researched and implemented across the nation in a number of states with very good outcomes. And I'll just leave it with, 60% of people with IDD, according to my research, will experience behavioral health issues, mental health issues at some point in their lifetime. We know that this is an issue, and what a great opportunity that the task force has to address this in a real blue sky thinking. So thank you for your time today. And importantly, thank you for everybody on the call today for everything that you bring to this conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Cristiano. And I'll share that I can see that you've gotten some written testimony there for you, and for anyone who wants to submit their written testimony, please feel free to share it with us. For those who weren't able to, I know we've got a number of task force members on the phone, but for those who aren't able to join, who might be interested in reading later, I know some of our task force members do. So please feel free to pass that along. As I shared with someone else, thank you for the good work that you're doing. It's really needed and really important. So thanks. And thank you for the specific recommendations as well. Okay, next we have Louisa Wren.
Thank you, Summer, and thank you to all of the members of the task force. I'm Louisa Wren. I work for Rocky Mountain Health Plans, and Rocky Mountain Health Plans was the organization that was hired to manage the it ended up being 3.5-year cross-system crisis response pilot. I worked closely with the community-centered boards and the mental health centers in Mesa, Larimer, Montrose, Delta, and Garfield counties. And we worked very closely to implement a cross-system program where the mental health centers worked very closely with the community-centered board IDD specialists. And I saw firsthand through the work that I did both with the CCBs and the community mental health centers, as well as I worked closely with families because I sat through all of the audits throughout the 3.5 years and met many, many families and their children who benefited from the work that was done in the pilot. Specifically, the close collaboration and cross-training between mental health center employees and the IDD experts. I saw over the years that the training that was provided for the staff that was hired to go out and respond to individuals with intellectual and developmental diagnoses who were having a mental health crisis. The actual staff at the CCBs and the mental health centers became far more confident in responding, were able to de-escalate situations due to their training. And then they also worked closely with, many of them worked closely with police in their communities so that the IDD, the staff with IDD expertise would actually train, would actually go out and train police and for other first responders so that the response for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in crisis had a much better outcome. So I am a big proponent of proper cross-system training and a proponent of people with that expertise being the ones to respond and getting paid to respond when one of these individuals in our communities is having a behavioral health crisis. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Louisa. It's good to see you again. And thank you just for the reminder and the importance of just the training and the education. We've certainly heard those are some big themes that have come up in our conversations, and we definitely recognize the importance of that. So thank you. Okay, next we have Terry Barnhart. Terry, don't forget to unmute yourself.
There we go. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. I have read the media release by the Department of Human Services, and this response can be used as my electronic signature.
Thank you.
I want to talk about my son, Ben. He is 25 and he struggles with an intellectual disability that makes him act about like a 5-year-old. He also has severe mental illness and physical illnesses such as kidney disease and GI issues with swallowing. And this resulted in him needing a G-tube for nutrition and a Foley catheter to empty his bladder. His teeth are terrible. There's fewer teeth now than what shows in this picture. And they're often infected. He gets frequent UTIs. And because of all this, he requires comprehensive whole body supports because everything's connected. So for example, he does not accurately report pain. All we get to see are violent behaviors. And so it's not easy to detect the problem. Is it behavioral? Is it medical? We really don't know. He gets frightened and his go-to movement or go-to move is elopement. So I've seen him elope from a hospital 4 times in one session. When he's afraid, he tends to go nonverbal, even though he's a real chatty guy. And he certainly doesn't have recall of any of his comprehensive medical history. So this means he needs a guardian to speak for him. And I am his guardian. The healthcare system must be willing to explore all avenues of handling his reactions and getting accurate information from his guardian when they see him. So here's a guy, multiple disabilities, and it's near impossible to get critical care for him. He has a wonderful set of specialists. He has PCP, everything's right now through UC Health for his ongoing care. But the problem is when it's critical and he needs to go to a hospital, which has occurred twice this month in Pueblo, the answer for us is always the same. Even though the attending doctor says he meets criteria for admission, the psych unit will not handle his physical issues and the medical unit won't handle his aggressive behaviors. So instead of getting medical care that he needs and honestly deserves, he is given a sedative and returned back to his residence. So in that case, his discharge papers will say that the guardian, me, agrees that this is the best option, which of course is very inaccurate. Could they put him in a medical unit and station security at the door? Yes. Could they put him in a psych unit and bring in medical nurses and doctors? Yes. Could they transfer him somewhere like, I don't know, University Hospital where I think he would get good care? Yes. Did they? No. So our kids really, and I say kids and adults, are not wanted in the critical care setting. They're too complicated, they're difficult to diagnose. The system just doesn't have the accommodations and training to understand their needs and find the root cause of the problems. The solution is always just to put a Band-Aid on the current issue and then release them. And I'm sure from talking to friends, I'm not the only one to experience this. Our community has seen this numerous times. Our kids and adults with IDD, especially those with mental illness, are rushed out of the hospital door as fast as possible. So a few months earlier, Ben needed critical care in the Denver metro area. He was taken to the nearest hospital by first responders, and there he ended up needing an 8-person physical restraint due to elopement, along with mechanical and chemical restraints to be able to contain him. This is who he is, However, when they found out he had an intellectual disability, he was discharged minutes after being restrained. I was told by the doctor that they just don't provide care for those with IDD. They didn't even treat his arm where he was scratched and bleeding from the restraints. I mean, I ended up doing that at home. They could have transferred him to a hospital that could care for him, and I asked about that, and they said that is not an option. They don't do that. So as the sedative wore off at home, because I wasn't going to let them discharge him just off to the street, that's certainly not in his best interest. So as the sedative wore off, he was just as bad as before. But what I learned was that calling 911 and having them transport to a hospital was not an option. I have sustained multiple attacks and injuries, but there's just no critical care for my son, for Ben. I think he and his friends deserve better. So I hope that this will help in addressing our issue with the critical care system. Thank you. I'm Terry Barnhart.
Terry, thank you so much. And Ben is lucky to have you. And you're right, he does deserve better, you know, and we do need a better, stronger system for critical care.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story with us today. Okay, the next person we have scheduled is Paul Graf. Paul, don't forget to unmute yourself.
Hi, I will start my video as well, actually. Thanks for letting me come on and tell you my story.
Are you comfortable being recorded, Paul?
Yes, I am. No problem.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks for asking. My wife and I have 3 children. Our oldest is now 11, and we live in Eagle County. And when we started to figure out that my son had some challenges because of his behavior pretty early on, and we had just a very, very difficult time getting him assessed, figuring out what was going on with him, and then once we did get a diagnosis, to find services for him. So I guess my story, frankly, is just how hard it is in rural counties and communities to find providers and get the early intervention care that I think can really improve longer term outcomes. He's currently at a residential facility down in New Mexico, and he's doing well, and we anticipate he'll be back with us hopefully, you know, in less than a year. He's been there for about a year. So my experience in trying to find him services here was just so difficult. And that whole experience made me aware of the situation that I and so many other families find themselves in. So I decided to try to have an impact on that, and I started a pediatric behavioral mental health clinic up here back in June of last year. So we've been open less than a year, and in that time we have right before the COVID lockdown, we were treating about 50 kids per week with occupational therapy, speech therapy, and art therapy. And our whole mission, frankly, is to identify or help treat kids as early as possible to mitigate longer term effects of learning delays, developmental delays, and you know, I feel really good about what we've been able to do at the Val Mind Center, but we switched to all telehealth at the beginning of the lockdown, and 75% of the kids were successfully transitioned to telehealth, and another 25, it was a little too much. They're had a little more severe cases and didn't really benefit from the telehealth. But I guess what I would say is we could all benefit from a lot more focus on children and identifying their needs early on. One of the big problems we had was the school system itself. We asked for their help, and there was something about they just did not want to recognize that he had some needs, and I think it's really as a resource issue. They just didn't have the resources, frankly, to provide some extra care for him. And we were fortunate that we ourselves had resources ourselves to do it. But you know, I guess my story is just, all I want to say is there ought to be, or if there were, a stronger focus on identifying children who have more needs earlier and addressing them sooner. They're all upstream from a lot of the problems that come down the road, and there's a great big effort here with Eagle Valley Behavioral Health trying to address mental health needs. And I think the sooner you can get in and provide care for children, the better their outcomes will be over time. I guess that's all I really wanted to say.
Great, thank you, Paul. And I can certainly affirm that there are 26 members of our children's subcommittee who totally agree with you that there needs to be a focus on serving children and getting upstream and making sure they get the support that they need early on and the access. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate you all doing this.
Absolutely, it has to be done. Okay, next we're going to go to James Weingard. James, don't forget to unmute yourself.
Well, basically, first of all, I consent to be recorded and for the media to watch.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I am an adult on the autism spectrum, and I have 2 kids on it as well, 1 boy and 1 girl. Basically during this slowdown, the pandemic, that we were able to watch our kids, and it was great insight because we knew immediately that there was emotional and social and emotional needs that our kid had. And we contacted the school district, but they did not have resources from their counselor beyond some basic programs that they require. And they recommended that we go to an outside agency. And so did when we talked to behavioral health technicians, such as BCBAs and the RBTs. We noticed that they also do not have training in those areas. And so for a kid on the autism spectrum, it's really important because that's the age of 10 to 14, 70% at least have a co-occurring condition. And so this, basically from personal experience, I've recognized that of how important, having an outside either mental health or social emotional help would be. I've done a lot of work myself and found mindfulness, meditation, yoga, exercise immediately after, a meltdown. Those are things that help reconnect. So those are some of the needs that I've seen. Also wanted to bring up catatonia. Ruth Aspie, she's done a lot of work and from others that 12 to 20% have the condition, but it's not been diagnosed. And it should be, in every assessment that the kids go through. Also vision tracking, depth perception, interoception, locomotor, neurofeedback. These are things that are not on the radar of all diagnosticians. We had some great ones, but still, those are some of the more holistic type of approaches that could really help these kids. Also, finally, I wanted to also talk when it comes to the kids that hold on just one sec, but I know basically emotional coaching or improving knowledge about how emotions come together is very important. Like my son, we basically went, did the Daniel Tiger and went on and, taught them that anger, if you breathe for 4 seconds, that turns into being mad. Doing that type of coaching is very helpful, and it's always something that helps me out, whether, through other sources like spirituality or religion or whatnot. I want to shift gears to training for parents. One of the things that I had found extremely helpful was parental training, through Children's Hospital. They had the Hannon program, furthermore, like social skills training for parents. This is one way to cut down on the costs of ABA. They teach a lot of early childhood development, and I don't know. It's basically they teach early childhood development and allow basically the parent to become the therapist. And that's been important because the older programs used to have that as a main, a main focus. And I find that extremely helpful so that we can gear the programs more towards our kids. One thing that's also something that might be considered is using the county nurse home visitation programs as maybe a stopgap measure to help parents that do have developmental disabilities or intellectual disabilities gain on their parenting skills. And then finally, I was wanting to touch up a little bit on recommendations for adults with autism after being diagnosed. I was a late diagnosee, and I encourage the subcommittees to look at the systematic review. It's a study, systematic review of psychosocial interventions for adults with autism by the NIH for autism spectrum disorder. And that's all for me.
Great. Thank you so much, James. And it sounds like there's some powerful tools that are out there for parents. So that's really good and helpful to know. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we're going to have Brianna Fetters. Brianna, don't forget to unmute yourself. Brianna, are you with us? Okay, let's go on to Abigail Koenig, or Koenig.
Yep. Hi. Can you hear me?
Hi, Abigail. Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. I guess to start out, I just want to say thanks so much for allowing me to testify today and to the task force and the administration, just for asking these important questions and for seeking creative solutions. My name is Abby Koenig. I'm a board certified behavior analyst. I'm the founder of a behavior therapy organization that is focused on helping Coloradans with developmental disabilities to access evidence-based therapies called Colorado Autism Consultants. I come here today representing input from clients with developmental disabilities and their families, both in our metro location as well as our rural communities, as well as a network of disability providers from our rural Buena Vista location. As I gathered feedback for the testimony, the overwhelming thread that tends to transcend all of the feedback that we received really was centered around accessibility and difficulty with accessibility. Specifically, the following barriers: awareness of what exists, awareness of where within the system structure programs exist, how to navigate those processes to access those services, and understanding who is eligible for what services and what to do if the services that you really need don't align with the funding streams that you have. In terms of awareness of what exists. A family that receives a diagnosis for a child is already often desperate for help at that point and overwhelmed by information. Right now, Colorado has a multitude of really great programs, and they tend to fall within a lot of various departments within the state government and serve really specific purposes for individuals with behavioral concerns, but it's really hit and miss which programs families will be informed of, and no real central way of ensuring that families have the same information and can be directed to the programs that best meet their specific child's needs. 10 young children with the exact same behavioral concerns, say aggression, may be routed to 10 different places, perhaps Head Start or a school psychologist or their pediatrician, DHS, an RAE, a CCB, local hospital, private behavior therapy provider, and really that list just goes on and on. Each of those entities operate in their own specific silos, have their own processes, have their own funding streams, and provide their own types of treatments, which tend to only be a little sliver of what's actually available or maybe necessary to appropriately treat an individual. It's really confusing for providers as well. With even just within applied behavior analysis alone, we navigate and help families navigate a whole host of funding streams from Medicaid waivers, CES, CWA, SLS, DD Comp, EPSDT via Health First, mill levies, Medicaid buy-in programs for children with disabilities, Head Start, early intervention, school IEP services, DVR. Just between these alone, that falls under 4 separate Colorado government departments. And after 10 years of trying to navigate it, I still feel like I'm often treading unknown waters and navigating acronyms for each entity and speaking multiple languages. Even behavior or even specific professionals assigned within a specific government department often aren't clear what services exist within their own entities and how to get people enrolled. And we've really noticed that specifically in rural communities throughout the state where maybe services are more sparse or populations are low, that even when services are available, they aren't accessed as frequently. And so it's not uncommon for us to reach out to a rural CCB who isn't aware of how to enroll kids in a CES waiver, or reach out to Department of Human Services in a various rural community that may not be familiar with the Medicaid buy-in program for children with disabilities and may sign them up for CHIP plus well-meaningly, but then that doesn't lead to the same services that that client actually needs. So really that structure is a critical part that is really confusing. There's also a lot of misconception about what falls into where. I know within the world of autism, behavioral health, and we've heard it a lot in this testimony, is strongly associated with ABA therapy, but that isn't actually behavioral health as Colorado sees it. That's a whole different system. And if you go through the behavioral health path, it actually leads you down a very different path than you're looking for. A 5-year-old nonverbal child who maybe goes behavioral health realm, which seems reasonable, may end up accessing counseling services, psychiatry services, psychotropic medications to help with their behaviors. And as we all know, that is not the right route for that person. And that falls under behavior therapy, which happens to be its whole own separate silo, which means different funding streams, potentially different intake processes, different eligibility criteria, different providers than the system of family then exists in. Many times families end up leaving the system thinking that their needs can actually be served in Colorado, when a lot of times in reality it's not that, it's just that they haven't been connected with the correct services in the first place. Having that system of distinct silos often means that people take that route, end up with the wrong services and the wrong treatment. And since the services don't interact and connect well, that wrong treatment may be the only treatment that that individual receives. Even if someone does get the right service and the right treatment, they may not actually be eligible to receive it for a list of various things depending on which silo they're falling under. So I guess in summary, the main things that we really pulled out of it for recommendations, we're really trying to find a common place, perhaps a website where people can kind of enter in some basic information about themselves and get consistent and comprehensive information across all of the different agencies of what they're eligible for, how to apply for it, how to access it, and what those processes look like. That could be used across for doctors, behavior therapists, schools, and any entity that may be referring people to services.
Great, thanks so much, Abigail. We actually just recently completed a financial analysis of the children's behavioral health system in Colorado and the adult behavioral health system in Colorado. And we found that there are behavioral health system dollars across at least 9 different agencies, if not more than that, with over 60 different types of programs. So your point about trying to figure out, who's doing what and how to access those services definitely is reflected in that report and analysis. So we know that we need to figure out how to simplify it for everybody and to get the information easily. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next we have Tara Keene.
Hi.
Hello.
Thanks for
Tara,
having
are you comfortable?
me.
Sure, you comfortable being recorded?
Yes, that's fine. Absolutely.
Great.
So hi, my name is Tara Keene, and I am the president and CEO of Community Connections. We're a community-centered board that serves children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities down in Southwest Colorado. I'm also currently serving as the chair for the Emergency Responses in Communities Committee for Alliance Colorado. For those of you who don't know about Alliance, it's a statewide nonprofit organization, association of all of the community center boards and many program approved service agencies across Colorado. This ERIC committee that we are doing is a cross-agency effort to research and make recommendations for enhancing community-based services for people with IDD who are either in crisis or experiencing co-occurring mental health disorders. And so as an example of the sort of problems we're trying to solve, I would like to tell you a story about my friend Jane. And at the time of this tale, Jane was a woman in about her mid-50s. She has IDD and also an anxiety disorder. At the time she was living in a host home with another woman with IDD and a host home provider who just adored her. They were like family. But then suddenly Jane started showing some really bizarre behaviors. If she was anywhere around liquid, she would pour it on herself. Water, juice, fish bowls, anything wet. When she was in the community, she would just start pacing wildly. She even started jumping out of cars when they were moving. And since Jane didn't express herself verbally, she couldn't really tell her caregiver what was wrong in any other way. So her caregiver first took Jane to her primary care physician, thinking there must be something that was causing Jane physical discomfort. Well, the physician immediately assured Jane's caregiver that this was just an IDD behavior. Well, the team was already working that angle. There'd been no changes in Jane's life. The onset of her change in behavior was just so sudden and dramatic that the reason for her anxiety was really unclear. So Jane went and visited her psychiatrist at the Community Mental Health Center and got the exact same story. This was an IDD behavior that couldn't be addressed by the behavioral health system. Well, meanwhile, Jane's behaviors were just getting more and more extreme and dangerous. She became dunking her head in water. She almost drowned herself. Her outbursts were frequent. And finally, her caregiver and her family were just afraid for her safety. But what we found was because the experts were never around to witness the behavior, they just seemed to dismiss and downplay it. We attempted to get Jane into the local acute treatment unit where she could be monitored and assessed. And that was unsuccessful because Jane needs help with a lot of her activities of daily living. And that situation just isn't supported very well by a lot of the behavioral health system services. So finally, in order to be fully assessed by a team of interdisciplinary professionals, Jane had to be institutionalized. She had to be driven over 3 pretty gnarly mountain passes, and remember her proclivity for trying to get out of the car. So that was pretty scary, and ended up at Grand Junction Regional Center, which was 4 hours away from her host home, her parents, her siblings, everyone that she knew. Now, fortunately for Jane, we had a happy ending to the story. Her changed behavior was indeed due to medical causes, and after she was stabilized in Grand Junction, Jane finally moved back to Southwest Colorado, and she continues to thrive here. But we find that Jane's story is way too common. The silos between the medical, behavioral health, and IDD systems really prevent professionals from coordinating care effectively. We're finding that funding and contracts really dissuade behavioral health providers from treating individuals with a primary diagnosis of IDD. And as we all know, that would be like a doctor refusing to treat your depressant because you had primary diagnosis of diabetes. They just aren't the same thing. Now, while the situation is definitely exacerbated in our rural communities, like down in the Durango-Cortez area, we really see that these are issues statewide. Now, when the ERIC community and many other advocates are looking at right now is how can we remove some of those regulatory and statutory, contractual and funding barriers between these systems? Because we all do want to work together to create resources in local communities. We want to prevent these crises before they occur, or sufficiently treat them when they happen so that children and adults with IDD can stay in their homes, stay in their communities. We're also looking at how we can develop and train cross-disciplinary teams who can work closely with people with IDD and their families. We also understand that respite, both planned and during that time of crisis, can be really essential to stabilizing the situation. We're hoping to look at the way different systems are paid and how to decouple some of those payments from diagnoses. Seems like there are many opportunities to fix this system that really isn't working for people with IDD. I'm sure we've all been in agreement with that. It isn't working for those of us professionals who support them, and we really don't think it works for the taxpayer. So thank you for your time and attention to this really important issue, and we're hoping that together we can come up with some solutions.
Thank you so much, Tara. And we agree, there are ample opportunity to kind of change and improve our system. So thank you. And thank you for the good work that you're doing and helping people like Jane. Okay, next, I know we're running a little bit late over schedule. We have about 3 more people, so we do want to make sure that they have an opportunity to share their testimony. Next, we're going to go to Zach Maple. Zach, don't forget to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Are you comfortable being recorded?
I am, yes. I am a behavior analyst with DDRC, a community center board in Jeffco. I came here really with just kind of one request, one talking point, but as other things were brought up, I would like to highlight something else. Kelly was talking about behavioral services for Medicaid and the rates reduction and the risk that it poses for a reduction in force. Ever since the HIMAT was passed, the health insurance mandate for autism treatment, we've seen an increase in behavior analysts come to the state of Colorado, which has been a very good thing. As we know, and several people have mentioned, there's been a lack of resources, and behavior analysts aren't unique in that way. There's definitely not enough behavior analysts. And there's a risk of that getting even more reduced as services are getting less and less viable for behavior analysts to actually provide services here in Colorado. When the children's waiver switched to no longer provide ABA services and it was switched to EPSDT, it was a good shift because the caps weren't there as they were for the CES waiver. However, the reduction in rates are actually quite a bit. they were already about 20% lower than what they were at the waiver. So those providers were taking a hit, and now they're taking a hit again. I do have concerns that we are going to lose providers because of that. That is a big risk, and I think that it should be a big concern, because I think a lot of people that have spoken today have talked about just access to ABA services, not everybody. And clearly I'm speaking as a clinician, so I realize that I don't have as personal experience as a parent or a caregiver, but I see this from other families that I support. The one ask, or the one request that I was wanting to talk about was with regards to adults and the waivers that I'm familiar with, the comprehensive and SLS waiver. And Julie Cook mentioned this as well around the difficult in getting access to ABA services. And one area that I think could be an easy change, a good helpful change, as long as we continue to try to get behavior analysts to the state, would be the caps that are embedded in the comprehensive waiver. Right now, there is a cap. It doesn't matter the tier level that somebody is on with a comprehensive waiver. So it doesn't matter the intensity or supports that have been identified for that individual. They could be a tier 1 for the CIS, or they could be a tier 5. They are still allotted the same amount of behavioral supports under that waiver, which I don't think anybody could say that that's person-centered. There needs to be some kind of flexible range of services as well for those adults, because as we've already heard today, that it's not a one-size-fit-all for ABA services. It really needs to be personalized, and there's no way to do that when I'm capped at only providing 1 hour of consultation services, counseling services a week throughout the year. There are additional line units available, but 20 hours of consultation, 1 hour a week, 20 hours annual of consultation services, 1 hour a week of counseling services is just not enough, especially for the harder individuals that are really facing some challenges. And then you have burnout. There's burnout across the board because they're not getting that kind of support. So that would be my one ask. One area of focus that I think that we could make a change in the comprehensive waiver is if we could make that change to have a more flexible units to be provided for ABA services. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Zach, for sharing your perspective and for raising that. I definitely made a note of it, so we'll kind of try to look into it and see what's possible. And I know we've got a couple of folks from HICPUF on here as well, so I'm sure that they were listening carefully. So thank you. Okay, next we have Patricia Hankey. Patricia, don't forget to unmute yourself. All right. Okay, so we're gonna go to last but not least, Dr. Corey Rosenberg. And Dr. Rosenberg, I know that you and Dr. Oliver really helped to organize today, so I wanted to say thank you for that and for bringing us all together. And certainly if any of the two of you have anything you want to share after your testimony, that would be great. But with that, I'll hand it over to you, Corey.
Okay. Thanks, Summer, and thanks, everyone. I'm Corey Robinson Rosenberg, and I am a member of the Long-Term Services Competency Subcommittee of the Behavioral Health Task Force. I'm Professor of Pediatrics and Psychiatry at the CU School of Medicine, and for a number of years directed JFK Partners at Colorado's University Center of Excellence. But today, what I'm going to do for testimony is read some testimony from Renee Marino, who, well, and it shall speak for itself. And Renee gave permission for this to be read in, and I'm good with being recorded. My name is Renee Marino, and I am a certified START coordinator providing intensive services, prevention and intervention services in Larimer County. I have been part of the Cross Systems Crisis Response Program since 2016, working closely with Summit Stone Health Partners in an effort to bridge gaps in services through collaboration and cross-training. The development of the crisis program has been instrumental in providing resources and care to individuals and families that have felt a sense of hopelessness and helplessness during times of acute crisis. The pilot established a framework for a continuum of care. The goal of the crisis program was to support the system to serve individuals to fill gaps when possible and facilitate collaboration to advocate for needed services. By helping to resolve the immediate destabilizing situation allows for hope and change going forward. The crisis program allowed us to provide support within 24-hour crisis and inpatient psychiatric facilities so that treatment is appropriate for the unique needs of individuals with dual diagnoses. We work as a team to create opportunities. This includes mutual respect that allows for team input and helping the program to improve and change. Developing and maintaining fellowship with others to share common attitudes, values, interests, and goals through outreach. Humanity, conducting all activities with compassion, understanding, and kindness. People are treated with dignity and respect. Prior to the crisis program, help was not available to families at night or on weekends when faced with a crisis, nor have there been options outside of the hospital for their loved one experiencing a crisis to go to for help. Since the crisis program, families, community partners, and the people we are determined to help finally had an opportunity to be heard and be provided with oxygen, a sense of hope and help. The result of the extensive training has provided accessible and appropriate care. Individuals and their support network have been able to receive treatment that has bridged gaps in care. Individuals struggling to maintain stability in their current living environment were provided with the appropriate services, therefore lessening the strain and burden on a system unable to handle the complexity of some of these cases by reducing costs and recidivism rates. Additionally, this has reduced law enforcement, first responder contact, and allowed interventions to occur within the home. This has been an integral step in the right direction to face, beat, and change the odds for individuals with IDD and complex mental health needs. During this uncertain time, Foothills Gateway, Inc., as an agency, has been able to maintain linkages with Summit Stone Health Partners by helping families and individuals reach a state of homeostasis as a team. We have changed the odds. And what I would go on to say, we heard from multiple people this afternoon about the START program that Denver is thinking of working with it from its mill levy. The crisis pilot, which Renee and Louisa and others have spoken to, really did work. There were some tremendous outcomes that the START folks were able to look at. And there is training available. Representative Young has actually introduced a bill and then everything shut down. But we would really like to look for opportunities to enhance the START model, which is very similar to high fidelity wraparound, but does have added emphasis, particularly at looking at the population of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we think it has much to offer. Certainly other things that we've heard about, as Christy Blakely pointed out, her recommendations to her sounded consistent with high fidelity wraparound, and they are consistent with the START model. So building on work that we began some years ago as the gap analysis, I really concur with much of the testimony that we've heard this afternoon. Our first speaker, Brian Talent, pointed out the issue that we have in this diagnostic conundrum. Others have made it as well. And it just, as several people have pointed out, it's really time to take these issues in hand and address them. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks so much, Corey, and thanks again for helping to organize it. We really appreciate it. We did have Patricia Hankey, who did join us. I want to make sure that she has an opportunity to share her testimony. Patricia, can we hear you now?
I can hear you, Summer. Can you hear me?
Great.
Awesome.
Yes.
Sorry
Take it
about
away.
that. I was on the phone line and I guess you couldn't hear me. Sorry.
No worries.
So thank you for this opportunity. I certainly give permission to be recorded. I'm Patricia Hankey, the director of the Colorado Office of Employment First, and I'm here representing Employment First initiatives in Colorado. Our office was developed about 7 months ago as a result of recommendations of the Employment First Advisory Partnership that was convened as a result of Employment First legislation in 2016. And so what you're going to hear me talk about is really employment, and employment being valued and seen as a viable therapeutic intervention for recovery and for behavioral health and just for health overall. I've worked with individuals with disabilities for nearly 30 years in vocational rehabilitation. And most often individuals have co-occurring disabilities, as we have heard here today with behavioral health and IDD and traumatic brain injury and so forth. And I've experienced firsthand that employment can significantly reduce behaviors, reduce symptoms or symptomatology that has been talked about here today. And it's just not my experience and perspective, but also research shows it, and there's extensive research. And when I talk about individuals with disabilities, I'm referencing individuals with significant disabilities, not necessarily just mild to moderate, but significant, in that employment brings increased self-esteem, it reduces psychiatric and substance use symptoms, and increases satisfaction. And it also helps our economy. We have individuals that transition from maybe using systems and entitlement programs to actually paying taxes and earning their own income. And it truly can be transformational and really is a civil right for individuals that are interested in employment. And I want to introduce a specific model, which is called the Individual Placement and Support Employment Model. That is the highest or the most researched evidence-based model in behavioral health, more so than other behavioral health models such as ACT, assertive community treatment, and other models. And so this intervention has been researched out of Dartmouth. There's 27 randomized controlled trials. All the research is on ipsworks.org if you want to visit. But the research shows that when individuals are working, they are feeling better and are feeling purposeful and hopeful and have reduced need to see the doctor or see their therapist, and they're fully engaged in competitive and integrated employment. And some of the principles of this model are around, obviously, competitive integrated employment is what I'm referencing, full inclusion, full integration in the community and employment. A specific component of this model is having an integrated treatment team where an employment specialist is on the clinical team, and they are talking about employment as a therapeutic intervention versus, another medication or another therapy appointment. And we see the outcomes in terms of people thriving in terms of their mental health, their behavioral health. In these, the issue is, you know, in the field of vocational rehabilitation, evidence-based models has not been part of the culture. And at the Colorado Office of Employment First, one of our charges is to build service provider capacity around employment and to implement evidence-based practices. And so this model is implemented in Colorado currently in 12 of 17 community mental health centers. It's one of our IDD service provider agencies, Easter Seals, is implementing it. It's also in 3 opioid treatment provider sites, and then also in Jefferson County with their TANF program. And I guess what I want people to know is this program's not funded. It's all repurposed money. Indigent dollars are being repurposed to fund this, and therefore mental health centers are choosing not to, or they are repurposing their money to other things, or they just don't have the repurposed dollars. So we are getting called upon. The service provider agencies want to implement this, but there's not an avenue to do it. And being a model that's the most researched in behavioral health, I would think that it would be advantageous to consider it as a therapeutic intervention as much as a clinical intervention. And the research shows that people that have access to an IPS program are 2 to 3 more times likely to go to work. The placement rate is at 56% versus a traditional rate, which is 23%. And so the return on the investment is there. It's a more cost-effective program than any other traditional employment services. And those models that are implemented to fidelity get higher outcomes. I mean, the data is there. And so the other piece I wanted to just share, just another statistic, is 67% of individuals with significant mental illness or other co-occurring disabilities want to go to work, and only 2% have access to an IPS program. So we have a lot of individuals with disabilities wanting to go to work that have no avenue to get there, which are keeping them kind of stuck in a cycle of care, of managing symptoms, where employment really could be an avenue to transform their lives. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Patricia. And as someone who has a long history in workforce development, you're speaking to my heart. So I definitely understand the importance of the supported employment programs. So thank you for sharing your information with us and your point of view, and for reminding us that there's still a lot of funding that's needed to support those important programs. I just want to, before I hand things over to our Lieutenant Governor, just to say a couple of closing remarks. I want to thank everyone again for taking the time to be with us today, to share your stories. A special shout out to Corey Rosenberg and Patricia Oliver for helping us to organize this today. I think we heard a lot of really important information, and I know that we had a number of behavioral health task force members on the phone, as well as a number of senior leadership staff from the Department of Human Services. So just thanks everyone. And with that, Lieutenant Governor, I'm going to hand it over to you to just share a couple of closing remarks. And don't forget to unmute yourself.
I think the hardest part of my day is always the mute and the unmute button. So in our new COVID world. So anyway, thank you, Summer. And it's really nice to see so many behavior analysts on the Zoom meeting today. And I appreciated the kudos from Julie Cook at the beginning. So a lot of you know from my history that I've worked really hard to get services for people with physical disabilities, IDD, and people on the spectrum for most of my career. But obviously, from the testimony today, we still have lots of work to do yet in mental health, but we always have had, and as long as I've been in the field of disability, which has been over 5 decades. It was really nice to end it with a fellow DVR professional, because we all know that our work is a big part of our who we are. So that's I love DVR, and that's what my master's is in. I appreciated the woman who raised the note again that we should look at all of the studies that have been done over the years to help improve the situation for people with developmental disabilities, and look at all the task force recommendations, the commission recommendations, things like that, because I don't want their work to go into some big void somewhere, because I think we could glean a lot of information from the previous efforts. So I appreciated that comment as well. And I know the mom who talked about how important the whole person is. That's another thing we've discussed on the Behavioral Health Task Force. If you have an infected tooth, it certainly is going to affect your behavior. So we've done a lot of discussion about how important it is to make sure we treat the whole person and integrate as best we can all the different therapies and behavioral health treatments into the whole person treatment. So I just want to thank the organizers for today, and especially thank the people on the Zoom call that shared your personal struggles and your family struggles, because that's what's important to me, is that we are able to address those issues. So it was really important to me to hear. And I also saw lots of familiar faces on Zoom that have gone back with me for many years. So it was great to see you all again, Christy Blakely included. So I wish I could say that what we're all trying to do is going to be easy. But as Governor Polis says, if it was easy, it would have been done already. But I just want you all to know that we just really have a passionate group of task force members working really hard on this effort. And my hope is that we will see meaningful change come from this effort. And so thanks for being a part of it, because we couldn't do it without you. So Summer has done a great job leading the effort over how long has it been, Summer? How many months?
Just over a year.
So we're in really good hands with Summer, and so I just want to thank her as well. And Summer, maybe I should turn it back to you to tell the group about what our next steps are with the task force, so that they kind of have an idea of where we're headed. And
Sure. So a couple of things I'll just point out actually real quickly is our long-term competency subcommittee, which Dr. Rosenberg is on and referenced earlier, is actually meeting tomorrow afternoon to talk about some specific recommendations for the IDD population. And we expect that those will probably be put in front of the task force upcoming either at our June 5th or our June 9th meeting. I'll make sure you all get a follow-up notice with our website, which has all of that information for meetings, and everyone from the public is welcome to listen in, and we always have time put aside for public comments. Our goal at this point is to have a draft of the blueprint available in the first half of July, so that we can circulate it to all of you and to members of the public and hear feedback, so that we have enough time to incorporate some of that feedback and present it to Governor Polis in the middle of August of 2020. So we still have a lot of work to do in a fairly short period of time. But as the Lieutenant Governor said, we have a really committed group of people and who are really adamant about making change. We certainly don't want this to be a report or a blueprint that sits on the shelf. Not only, as we've started putting it together already, not only will it have recommendations, but it will also have an implementation plan that kind of lays out for the next couple of years. Here's all the things that need to be accomplished to reform our behavioral health system, so that we have a system that works for all Coloradans, as well as the staffing, the budget, the public policy, and in some ways, most importantly, the accountability, right? So who's going to actually get those different pieces of the implementation plan done? So stay tuned, keep checking our website, and exciting things are happening. And thanks again for everyone's support. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.